Hello there, welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Galaxy, where humans face the unknown, outsmart the impossible, and turn every test into victory. So sit back and let the story begin.
Nobody on the Galactic Council had ever seen a human cry before. That was the problem. The translation happened by accident. A cheap cargo freighter called the Dented Hull had picked up a distress signal near the outer rings of the Vesa system. The signal was old, weak, almost dead, but the freighter's captain, a four-armed Grellian named Daka, had a rule. You always answer a distress call. Always. Because one day, the call might be yours. What they found inside the drifting shuttle was not what anyone expected. There was a human female, roughly 30 cycles old by Earth counting. She was thin, dehydrated. Her lips were cracked, and her skin was pale from weeks without proper sunlight. Around her, wrapped in torn pieces of her own clothing, were six alien children. Not human children. These were Vekari young, small, scaled, cold-blooded creatures with wide golden eyes and thin tails that curled when they were frightened. All six of them were alive. Warm. Federal the human was nearly dead. Daka stood in the airlock and stared. His second officer, an insect-like Chiron named Pris, made a clicking sound that meant confusion. She gave him her food. Pris said quietly, "All of it." Daka asked, "All of it?" "And her water, and her heating pads." Vekari Young cannot regulate body temperature. She used her own body heat when the pads ran out. Daka looked at the six little Vekari, all of them clinging to the human woman like she was their mother. One of them, the smallest, was tucked inside her shirt against her bare skin, sleeping with its tiny claws wrapped around her collarbone. "Get the medical team," Daka said. "Now." They brought the human aboard. The medical officer, a Paulian with six eyes and steady hands, worked on her for 3 hours. Fluids, nutrients, cellular repair patches on her hands where frostbite had started to set in. The whole time, the Vekari children screamed and clawed at anyone who tried to take them away from her. They didn't take them away. They treated her with six little aliens piled on her legs and chest, hissing at the doctors. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she said was, "Are the kids okay?" Not "Where am I?" Not "What happened?" Not "Help me." "Are the kids okay?" Her name was Lena Marsh. She was 29 years old. She was a kindergarten teacher from a place called Wisconsin on Earth. She had been traveling on a passenger liner to visit a friend on a colony world when pirates hit the ship. In the chaos, she had grabbed every child she could find and pulled them into an escape shuttle. The only children near her happened to be Vekari. She didn't know anything about Vekari biology. She didn't know they needed heat. She didn't know what they ate. She figured it out by watching them, by trial and error, by staying awake for days at a time, making sure they were breathing. "I'm a teacher," she told Daka when he asked why. "That's what teachers do. You keep the kids alive. Everything else comes after." Daka had been sailing the trade routes for 40 cycles. He had seen bravery. He had seen sacrifice. He had once watched a Grellian Marine charge a burning engine core to save his crew. But something about this small, soft, shivering human woman made him feel a feeling he did not have a word for in his language. The Vekari government was contacted. The children belonged to a diplomat's family. They had been considered dead for 3 weeks. When the diplomat, a tall and sharp-faced male named Secker, arrived on Daka's ship to collect the children, he walked into the medical bay and stopped. His six children were asleep on the human. On her, piled on her like she was a heated rock in the sun season. The smallest one was still inside her shirt. Lena was reading to them from her personal tablet, some human story about a bear and a rabbit, and she was doing different voices for each character to Secker's throat sack inflated, which meant he was experiencing deep emotion. "She is the one," he asked Daka. "She is the one." Secker walked closer. Lena looked up. She smiled at him. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "Hi," she said. "You must be their dad. They're amazing kids. The little one, the shy one, she's really smart. She figured out how to open the emergency panel before I did." Secker looked at his children, then at this human, then at his children again. "You starve yourself," he said. "They're kids," Lena said. Like that explained everything to her, it did. Secker was not just any diplomat. He was the Vekari representative to the Galactic Council. He was powerful, connected, respected, and he had just watched a human woman nearly die to save children that were not her own, not her species, not even from her world. He owed her a debt that his culture said could never be repaid. "What do you want?" he asked her. "Name it. Anything. Wealth. Land. A title." Lena thought about it for a moment. "Can I get a ride to my friend's colony? My ticket was on the other ship, and I think it blew up." Daka made a sound that might have been a laugh. Pris clicked rapidly, which was definitely a laugh. Secker stared at her. "You saved my children's lives, and you want a bus ride. I mean, if it's not too much trouble." That was how Lena Marsh met the Galactic Council. Not as a warrior, not as a politician, not as a scientist or a general or a spy. She met them as a kindergarten teacher from Wisconsin who just wanted a ride. And that, as it turned out, was exactly what the galaxy needed. 3 weeks after Lena Marsh was rescued, the Galactic Council received a formal request that made no sense to anyone. Secker, the Vekari diplomat, stood before the full assembly of 214 species representatives and said, in his calm and measured voice, that he wished to nominate a human kindergarten teacher as a cultural bridge advisor to the council. The chamber went quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then the noise started. The Grellians wanted to know what a kindergarten was. The Palians wanted to know what qualifications she held. The Chiron delegate clicked furiously and asked if this was a joke. The Torshan representative, a massive gray-skinned creature with a voice like gravel sliding down a hill, simply said, "No." Secker waited for the noise to stop. Then he told them the story. All of it. The shuttle, the children, the starvation, the body heat, the bear and rabbit voices. The chamber went quiet again, but this time it stayed quiet for much longer. "She kept 6 Vekari young alive for 22 days, Secker said. "She had no training, no equipment, no knowledge of our biology. She figured it out because she refused to let them die. I'm not asking you to give her power. I'm asking you to let her sit in a room and talk. That is what she does. She talks to children, and from what I have seen, most of you behave like children anyway." That last part caused some anger, but also some quiet agreement. The vote passed by a narrow margin, mostly because nobody wanted to be the species that voted against the woman who saved 6 babies. Lena arrived at the council station 3 months later. She brought 1 suitcase, a box of color markers, and a tablet loaded with 400 children's books. She was given a small apartment on level 42, a translation implant behind her left ear, and an access badge that led her into the lower council chambers. She was not given any real authority. That was the point. She was supposed to be decoration, a symbol, a political favor that Secker could point to when he needed goodwill. Nobody expected her to actually do anything on her first day. She got lost. The council station was enormous, a structure the size of a small moon with over 800 levels, thousands of corridors, and a population of roughly 2 million beings from across the galaxy. Lena wandered into the wrong section and ended up in the trade dispute wing, where the Moravi and the Kellic had been arguing about mining rights for 11 years. The same argument, the same room, the same 2 diplomats sitting across from each other, hating each other so deeply that the air itself felt heavy. Lena walked in because the door was open and she thought it was a cafeteria. "Oh, sorry," she said. "I'm looking for the food court. Is this level 40? The Moravi diplomat, a thin blue-skinned female named Yevra, stared at her. The Kellic diplomat, a heavy-set creature with stone-like skin named Brune, also stared at her. "This is the territorial arbitration chamber," Yevra said coldly. "Right. Okay, that sounds important." Lena looked at the table between them. It was covered in documents, holographic maps, data tablets, and what appeared to be a half-eaten meal that had been sitting there for days. "Have you 2 been here a while?" 11 years, Brune said, and the way he said it carried the weight of a man who had lost a decade of his life to a chair and a table. Lena sat down. Not because she was invited, not because she had a plan. She sat down because Brune looked tired, and in her experience, tired people needed someone to sit with them. "What's the fight about?" she asked. Yevra and Brune looked at each other. Then, slowly, they started explaining. The Moravi had claimed a mineral-rich asteroid belt in a shared system. The Kellic said it was theirs by ancestral right. The Moravi said ancestral right didn't apply to space. The Kellic said it did. Both sides had lawyers. Both sides had historical records. Both sides have been saying the same things for over a decade. Lena listened. She listened the way she listened to a 5-year-old explain why they hit another kid with a block. Carefully, without judgment, with her full attention. When they finished, she said, "So you both need the minerals?" "Yes," they both said. "And there's enough for both of you." Silence. "Is there enough for both of you?" Lena asked again. Yevra opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. Technically, the belt contains sufficient resources for both civilizations' needs for the next several hundred cycles. Then why are you fighting? More silence. Because they claimed it first, Brune said. Because they refused to negotiate, Yevra said. You've been negotiating for 11 years, Lena said. I think the problem isn't that you won't negotiate. I think the problem is that you're both scared. If you share, you have to trust each other. And trusting someone is really hard when you've been angry at them for a long time. She said it simply, like she was explaining sharing to a classroom. That Brune's stone face cracked. Not physically, but something behind his eyes shifted. Yevra's blue skin flushed slightly, which meant embarrassment. In my classroom, Lena said, when two kids fight over a toy, I don't take the toy away. I sit them down and I ask them to tell me one nice thing about the other kid. Just one. It doesn't fix everything, but it changes the air in the room. She looked at Brune. Say one nice thing about her. Brune stared at her like she had lost her mind. Just one thing. Come on. 11 years. You must have noticed something. The room was painfully quiet. Then Brune said very slowly, she is consistent. She does not change her position based on political pressure. That is respectable. Lena looked at Yevra. Your turn. Yevra's jaw tightened. Then, quietly, he cares about his people. Truly, it is not performance. He is here because he believes in their future. Something in the room changed. It was small, almost invisible. But Lena felt it the way a teacher feels the moment a difficult kid decides to try. Okay, Lena said. Now, let's talk about sharing the rocks. The Moravi-Kellic mining dispute was resolved in 6 days. After 11 years, it took 6 days. The agreement was simple, fair, and left both sides satisfied. When the council asked how she did it, Lena shrugged. I teach kindergarten, she said. It's the same thing, just bigger kids. The news about the Moravi-Kellic resolution spread through the council station like fire through dry grass. 11 years of deadlock, broken in 6 days by a human woman with no political training and a box of colored markers. Most of the council thought it was a trick. Some thought it was luck. A few thought Secker had somehow arranged the whole thing to increase his own influence. But the Moravi and the Kellic both signed the agreement, both praised the process, and both asked if the human could be involved in future talks. Lena said yes, because that was what Lena always said when someone asked for help. Within a month, she had been pulled into 3 more disputes. A water rights conflict between the Palians and the Jossery. A border disagreement in the Rim territories. A cultural insult case where a Torshan diplomat had accidentally eaten a plant that the Fenari considered sacred, and both sides were threatening economic sanctions. Lena solved the plant one in an afternoon. She made the Torshan apologize, helped him understand why the plant mattered, and then suggested the Fenari gift him a potted version so he could grow it himself and learn about their culture. The Torshan, a creature the size of a ground transport vehicle, was so moved that he cried, which for a Torshan meant a deep rumbling sound that shook the furniture. The water rights took longer. For days. But she got it done. The border dispute took 2 weeks, and that one was hard. She came out of the final session looking tired in a way that went deeper than her body. Secker found her sitting on the floor of her apartment, eating something from a plastic container, staring at the wall. Are you well? He asked. Some fights aren't about the thing they say they're about, she said. The border thing wasn't really about borders. It was about respect. One side felt ignored for a long time, and the border was just a place where all that pain came out. Secker sat down next to her on the floor. His tail curled around his feet, which meant he was comfortable. How did you resolve it? I let them be angry. Really angry. I didn't try to calm them down or make them be polite. I just let them say all the things they've been holding in. And then, when they were empty, when all the anger was out, I asked them what they actually needed. Not wanted, needed. And they needed to be heard. That's all. Once they felt heard, the border stuff was easy. Secker studied her. In Vekari culture, there was a concept called the quiet blade. It was a person who could cut through conflict not with force or cleverness, but with something softer, something that made others lower their defenses. The Vekari had legends about such people, but they had never actually met one. Until now. You are dangerous, Secker said. Lena laughed. I'm a kindergarten teacher. Yes, that is why you're dangerous. Not everyone was happy about Lena's growing influence. The Chiron collective, in particular, was troubled. The Chiron were an insectoid species that operated on pure logic and consensus. They did not understand emotions. They did not use them. They considered emotional reasoning to be a flaw in biological intelligence, a weakness that needed to be managed, not celebrated. The Chiron delegate, Prisvan, requested a formal meeting with Lena, not in the dispute chambers, in the Chiron embassy, which was a cold, perfectly organized space with no decoration, no color, and no chairs designed for comfort. Lena brought a chair cushion from her apartment. She put on the hard seat and sat down. Prisvan watched her do this with visible confusion. You are the human mediator, Prisvan said. I'm a teacher who accidentally got a weird job, Lena said. But yes, your methods are irrational. Probably. You encourage emotional expression in diplomatic settings. You allow anger. You allow tears. You allow personal stories that have no bearing on the technical details of a dispute. This is inefficient and illogical. It works, though, Lena said. Prisvan's mandibles clicked in a pattern that meant frustration. We have analyzed your 4 successful mediations. In each case, the resolution was technically available before your involvement. The data, the resources, the solutions were all present. You added no new information. You changed nothing material. Right? Lena said. Then what did you do? Lena thought about it. She thought about it the way she thought about how to explain sharing to a room full of tiny humans who didn't understand, yet that other people had feelings too. I made it safe, she said. Explain. When people fight, they're usually scared. Scared of losing something. Scared of looking weak. Scared of being the one who gives in first. All that fear makes them hard. It makes them hold on tighter. And the tighter they hold, the less they can see. She leaned forward. What I do is I make the room safe enough for them to be scared out loud. Once they can admit they're scared, they don't have to be hard anymore. And once they're not hard, they can actually think. They can actually listen. The solution was always there. They just couldn't reach it because they were too busy protecting themselves. Prisvan was silent for a long time. In Chiron terms, a long silence meant deep processing. This is an emotional manipulation technique, Prisvan said finally. No, Lena said firmly. Manipulation is when you make someone feel something so you can use them. What I do is the opposite. I make people feel safe so they can use themselves. I'm not controlling anyone. I'm getting out of the way. More silence. Your species confuses us, Prisvan said. We confuse ourselves most of the time, Lena said. But we're good at sitting with confused people. We've had a lot of practice. Prisvan requested a second meeting, and a third. Each time, the questions got deeper. Each time, Lena answered simply and honestly. She did not try to impress the Chiron with big words or complex theories. She told stories about her classroom, about the kid who bit everyone until she figured out he was scared of loud noises, about the girl who wouldn't speak for a month until Lena sat with her every day at lunch, not talking, just being there, until the girl finally said, "You're warm." That story made Prisvan go completely still. The child said you were warm, Prisvan repeated. Yeah, not intelligent, not skilled, not powerful, warm. Kids know what matters, Lena said. Something changed in the Chiron collective's position on humans after those meetings. The official report stated that humans possessed a form of social intelligence that operated below the level of rational analysis, a biological capacity for emotional resonance that functioned as a conflict resolution tool. The unofficial report, which Prisvan wrote personally and shared with no one, said something much simpler that IT said. She is warm. This is not a weakness. We were wrong. The first real test came 7 months after Lena arrived at the council station, that a species called the Vrethki had surrounded a small colony world called Pelos with warships. Pelos belonged to the Draenei, a peaceful trading species with no military. The Vrethki claimed that Pelos sat on their ancestral migration route and demanded the Draenei leave. The Draenei had lived there for 6 generations and refused. The Vrethki gave them 10 days. The council debated. They debated the way they always debated, which meant a lot of talking, a lot of accusing, and absolutely no action. The Grellians proposed sanctions. The Torsians proposed a military response. The Chiron proposed a mathematical analysis of the most efficient outcome, which pleased no one. The Palians proposed forming a committee to study the problem, and several delegates threw things at the Paulian representative. While the council talked, the clock ran down. On day 7, Lena walked into the main chamber during a recess and found Secker standing by the observation window, looking out at the stars. His throat sac was deflated, which meant exhaustion. They won't act in time, he said. The Draenei colony has 40,000 people. Families. Children. Lena stood beside him. What do the Vrethki actually want? They say they want the planet. What do they actually want? Secker looked at her. In the months they had known each other, he had learned to recognize that voice. It was her teacher voice, the one that said she was already 3 steps ahead and waiting for everyone else to catch up. I don't know, he admitted. Then someone needs to ask them, Lena said. The Vrethki refuse all communication with the council. They consider us corrupt and weak. Do they consider me corrupt and weak? Secker blinked. Both sets of eyelids. You want to talk to the Vrethki? I want to ask them what they want. That's different. They're a warrior species. They settle disputes through combat. They do not respect words. They're using words right now, Lena said. They made a demand. A demand is words. If they only respected fighting, they would have attacked already. They're waiting. That means they want someone to listen. Secker brought the idea to the council. The reaction was immediate and loud. Sending an unarmed human civilian to negotiate with a species that had surrounded a planet with warships was called insane, reckless, and suicidal, sometimes all 3 in the same sentence. Lena sat through the entire debate without speaking. When they were done yelling, she raised her hand like a student in class. Can I say something? The chamber quieted. You've been talking for 7 days. In 3 more days, 40,000 people might die. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a politician. I'm a teacher. And right now, the Vrethki are acting like the kid in class who flipped a table because nobody asked him what was wrong. Someone needs to ask. I'm good at asking. The vote was messy and close, but it passed. Mostly because nobody else had a better idea, and the clock was running out. They put Lena on a fast diplomatic shuttle with a Grellian pilot and a Vekri translator, though Lena's implant handled most languages well enough. The shuttle flew toward the Vrethki blockade. 36 warships, each one bristling with weapons, arranged in a sphere around the blue-green world of Pelos. The shuttle was tiny between them. Like a seed among boulders, the Vrethki flagship was called the Teeth of Morning. Its commander was a massive creature named Garath, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick gray hide, with a face full of bone ridges and eyes like black river stones. He met Lena in the ship's combat hall, a place designed for ritual fighting, not talking. Garath looked down at her. She was small, soft. She had no weapons, no armor, no claws, no fangs. She smelled like lavender soap because she had taken a shower before coming, which she later said was because she wanted to feel normal before doing something terrifying. You are the council's champion? Garath asked. I'm a kindergarten teacher, Lena said. Can I sit down? My legs are shaky. I'm honestly really scared right now. Garath stared at her. In Vrethki culture, admitting fear to an enemy was the single most shocking thing a person could do. Warriors never showed fear, ever. To do so was to invite death. But this human did not say it like someone who was weak. She said it like someone who was scared and had showed up anyway. That was something different, something the Vrethki had a word for. They called it Gorake, which roughly translated to the courage of the soft body. It was a concept from their oldest legends, from a time before they were warriors, when their ancestors were small prey animals on a dangerous world. The bravest thing their ancestors ever did was leave their hiding places to find food, knowing they might be eaten. Garath sat down across from her. He did not order her killed. He did not laugh at her. He sat her down. Speak, he said. Why do you want this planet? Lena asked. It is ours. Okay, but why do you want it? Garatha's bone ridges shifted, which meant irritation. It is on the path. The old path. Our ancestors walked the stars along this route before these Draenei ever crawled out of their oceans. Walked the stars, Lena repeated. You mean migrated? Yes. You were a migrating species? You moved from world to world, long ago, before we became what we are now. Lena leaned forward. Do you miss it? The question hit Garath like a physical blow. His black eyes widened. His massive hands, which could crush metal, went still on the table. What, he said. Do you miss the migration? The moving? The journey? Silence filled the combat hall. Around them, Vrethki warriors stood like statues, weapons ready, watching their commander stare at a tiny human woman who had just asked him the one question no one had ever asked. We are warriors, Garath said, but his voice had changed. It was quieter, rougher, like something old and heavy was moving inside him. You are now, Lena said gently, but you weren't always. And you remember, that's why this path matters to you. Not because of the planet, because of what the path means. It means you were something else once. Something that moved and explored and followed the stars. Garath said nothing for a very long time. Then he said, the younglings do not know the old songs anymore. Lena's eyes went soft. It was the look she gave a child who had finally told her the real reason they were crying. Tell me about the songs, she said. And Garath, commander of 36 warships, conqueror of systems, the most feared military leader in the sector, began to talk about songs his grandmother used to sing about the stars. The blockade did not end that day. But something cracked open in that combat hall. Something old and buried and aching. And Lena, who had no weapons and no armor and no power at all, sat with it like she sat with every broken thing. With patience. With warmth. With time. Lena spent 3 days on the teeth of morning. She slept in a storage room on a metal slab that the Vrethki considered a bed. She ate their food, which tasted like burnt leather and salt, and she smiled and said thank you every time they gave her more. She asked for nothing. She complained about nothing. And every day, she sat with Garath in the combat hall and listened that he told her about the migration paths, the old routes that his species once followed across the galaxy, moving from world to world with the seasons of stars. He told her about the songs, the ones that mapped the routes in melody and rhythm, so that even young ones who could not read star charts could find their way home. He told her how his people had stopped migrating 300 years ago when they built their first permanent cities and began to conquer instead of wander. We became strong, Garath said, but we lost the path. And now you want it back, Lena said. The path is who we were. Without it, we are only what we do. And what we do is fight. Lena nodded. She understood this. She had seen it in children 1,000 times. The kid who only knew how to hit because no one had ever shown him another way to be strong on the 3rd day. She made her proposal. You don't need the planet, she said. You need the path. You need the route to be recognized. You need the galaxy to know that these stars, this trail through space belongs to your history. It's yours. It always was. Garath leaned forward. The Council will not recognize our ancestral claims. They have refused for decades. The Council refused because you showed up with warships. If someone points a gun at me and says, give me what's mine, I'm not going to listen to the mine part. I'm going to focus on the gun. Garath made a low rumbling sound. Not anger. Something closer to dark amusement. But if you put the gun down, Lena continued, and you come to the table, and you bring the songs and the maps and the history, and you say this is who we are and we need you to see us, then everything changes. Because now it's not a threat. It's a story. And people listen to stories. You want us to sing for the Council, Garath said flatly. I want you to show them who you really are. Not the warriors. The wanderers. The ones who follow the stars. Garath stared at her for so long that Lena started to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. Then he stood up, And for a moment, she was very aware of how big he was and how small she was and how far from home she had come. He raised one massive fist and pressed it against his chest. A Vrethki gesture she had not seen before. "You have Gore AK," he said. "The soft courage. My grandmother would have liked you." The Vrethki withdrew from Pelos on the 9th day. One day before the deadline, 40,000 Draenei colonists watched the warships pull away from their sky and wept with relief. But it was not over. It was just beginning. Garath came to the council station. Not with an army, not with weapons. He came with 12 elders, the last living Vrethki who still knew the old migration songs. They were ancient, wrinkled, their gray hides cracked with age. Some of them needed help walking. They had not left their home world in decades. Lena met them at the docking port. She bowed to each one, which was not a Vrethki custom, but which they accepted with grace because the gesture was clearly sincere. The council session was held in the Grand Chamber, the largest room on the station, built to hold all 214 species representatives at once. It was a place designed for politics, for arguments, for the careful exchange of power. IT had never been used for singing. Garath stood before the assembly. He was in simple clothing, no armor, no rank markings, just cloth. He looked vulnerable in a way that made several delegates uncomfortable. "We came here to threaten you," he said. "The human teacher showed me that we came for the wrong reason. We do not want your planet. We want you to remember what we were." Then the elders sang. The migration songs of the Vrethki were not beautiful in the way most species understood beauty. They were deep, rough, ancient. They sounded like stone grinding against stone, like wind through a canyon, like the slow turning of worlds. The melodies mapped routes between stars, and as the elders sang, a holographic display traced the paths across a projection of the galaxy, lines of light spreading outward. Thousands of years of wandering, encoded in music. The chamber was absolutely silent. Lena stood in the back, near the door, watching. Her eyes were wet. She did not wipe them. She let the tears come because she had learned long ago that crying was not weakness. It was the body's way of saying this matters. When the songs ended, there was a pause that seemed to last forever. Then the Torshan representative, the huge gray creature who had once voted against Lena's appointment, stood up. He pressed both of his massive hands flat on the table in front of him, which in Torshan culture was the highest form of respect. One by one, other delegates stood. The Grellians, the Palians, the Fenari. Even the Chiron, who did not understand music or emotion, stood because Prisvan had learned enough from Lena to know that sometimes the logical thing to do was to honor what you did not fully understand. The council voted that day to formally recognize the Vrethki migration heritage route. Every star system along the old path was marked, protected, acknowledged. The Vrethki did not gain territory. They gained something they had not had in 300 years. They gained their story back. Garath found Lena afterward. She was sitting on a bench in a corridor, eating a protein bar, still sniffling a little from the crying. "You changed everything," he said. "No," she said. "You changed everything. I just asked you to sing." He sat down next to her. The bench groaned under his weight. They sat in silence for a while, the warrior and the teacher, looking out through a corridor window at the stars. "In my culture," Garath said quietly, "we have a saying, the strongest wall is the one that bends." In my classroom, Lena said, "We have a saying too. Use your words, not your hands." Garath laughed. It was a sound like an earthquake, deep and rolling and real. Several people in the corridor stopped and stared, because no one had ever heard a Vrethki laugh before. Lena just smiled and offered him half a protein bar that he took it. 2 years after a kindergarten teacher from Wisconsin accidentally became the most important person on the Galactic Council station, a young Vekri journalist named Telly was given the assignment of writing a profile about Lena Marsh. Telly was nervous. She had covered wars, trade collapses, and political scandals. But this was different. Everyone she talked to about the human said something that didn't make sense. The warriors called her brave. The diplomats called her dangerous. The Chiron called her warm, and the Chiron never called anything warm. Telly found Lena in the station's lower market, a crowded, noisy place where dozens of species bought food and supplies. Lena was sitting cross-legged on the floor next to a jossery vendor's stall, helping a small jossery child build a tower out of empty food containers. The child had 3 arms and was using all of them. Lena was laughing. "Ms. Marsh," Telly said. Lena looked up. "Gall, are you the reporter? Hold on, we're almost at 10 levels. This is going to be a new record." The child added one more container. The tower wobbled. Lena held her breath. The tower stood. The child shrieked with joy, a high-pitched sound that made several nearby shoppers flinch. Lena cheered like the child had won a galactic championship. "Okay," Lena said, standing up and brushing off her knees. "Now I'm all yours." They walked through the station while Telly asked her questions. Lena answered them the way she answered everything, simply and honestly, without any attempt to make herself sound important. "I don't have a strategy," she said when Telly asked about her diplomatic approach. "I just listen. Most people haven't been really listened to in a very long time. When you listen, actually listen, not waiting for your turn to talk, but really hearing them, something opens up. They stop performing and start being real. And real people can solve problems. Performers can't. But you've resolved conflicts that the Council couldn't handle for decades," Telly pressed. "The Moravi-Kellic dispute, the Vrethki blockade, the Fenari sacred plant incident, the water rights, 12 successful mediations in 2 years. There must be something more." Lena thought about it while they walked past a Grellian food stall that smelled like cinnamon and engine oil. "When I was 6 years old," she said, "I had a teacher named Mrs. Patterson. She was old, tiny, had glasses that were always sliding down her nose. One day, a boy in our class named Derek threw a chair across the room. He was screaming, crying, completely out of control. Every other adult would have grabbed him or sent him to the principal. What did Mrs. Patterson do? She sat down on the floor, right there, in front of him, and she said, very quietly, 'I'm right here.' That's all. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She just sat and waited. And Derek stopped. He stopped because someone had finally made it clear that they weren't going anywhere. That no matter how bad it got, she was going to stay." Lena smiled. "I think about Mrs. Patterson every single day." As they walked, beings greeted Lena. A Torshan guard nodded to her, which for their species was the equivalent of a standing ovation. A pair of Fenari merchants waved and called her by name. A Chiron maintenance worker paused and said, "Hello, teacher," which Telly later learned was an unofficial title that had spread across the station. Everyone called her teacher. Not ambassador, not mediator, not counselor. Teacher. Telly asked about the title. "I didn't pick it," Lena said. "Someone started it and it stuck. I kind of love it, though. It's the only thing I ever really wanted to be called." The interview lasted 3 hours. Telly recorded everything. But the moment that stayed with her, the one she thought about long after the article was published, happened near the end. They were in Lena's apartment. It was small, messy. There were drawings on the walls, gifts from children of a dozen species who visited her regularly. There were mismatched cushions on every chair because Lena had learned that different species needed different kinds of comfort. There was a shelf of tablets loaded with children's stories in 47 languages. And on the bedside table, there was a framed photograph of an old woman with glasses sitting on a classroom floor. Mrs. Patterson, do you ever feel scared? Telly asked. You walk into rooms with beings 10 times your size, species that could kill you with one hand. You have no weapons, no guards, no training. Doesn't that terrify you? Every time, Lena said. Every single time. Then why do you do it? Lena picked up a drawing from her desk. It was from one of Sekir's children, the smallest one, the one who used to sleep inside her shirt. The drawing showed a stick figure with brown hair, surrounded by 6 small green shapes. Underneath, in shaky Vekari script, it said, "My warm person." Because someone has to be the one who sits down on the floor, Lena said. Someone has to be the one who says, "I'm right here." And if nobody else is going to do it, then I will. Not because I'm brave. Because the kids, the scared people, the ones throwing chairs, they need someone who stays. Telly's article was published across the Galactic Network. It was translated into 312 languages. It became the most read piece of journalism in council history. The title was simple. It was a phrase that a Chiron scientist named Prisvon had written in a private report that was never supposed to be seen by anyone. The title was, "She is warm." This is not a weakness. Within a year, 9 other human teachers were invited to the council station. Then 30. Then 100. They were sent to colony worlds, to trade hubs, to military outposts, to refugee stations. They brought colored markers and children's books and cushions for uncomfortable chairs. They brought patience. They brought the willingness to sit on floors. They brought warmth. The galaxy had spent 10,000 years trying to solve its problems with logic, with force, with technology, with threats. It had tried everything except the simplest thing that IT had never tried, just sitting with someone and saying, "I'm right here." Earth didn't conquer the galaxy. Earth didn't outsmart it or outfight it. Earth sent its kindergarten teachers, the ones who knew that the bravest thing in the universe was not strength or intelligence or power. The bravest thing was being soft in a hard world and refusing to become hard yourself. Lena Marsh never got a statue. She never got a medal or a title or a piece of land. What she got was something better. She got a galaxy full of beings who, for the first time in their history, learned the one lesson that every human child learns on their first day of school: be kind. Listen, share. And when someone is scared, sit with them. That's what teachers do.